welcome to another episode of All Politics is Local. All Politics is Local is a production of the Greater Blackstone Valley Democrats. For more information about the Greater Blackstone Valley Dems, feel free to visit our website at www.gbvdems.org. We have another great show planned for you tonight. With me in the studio is Christine Crean, the chairperson of the Milford Democratic Town Committee and a Democratic State Committee member. Also, Kevin Tagliaferri, who is the chairman of the Bellingham Democratic Town Committee and also a Democratic State Committee member. We're going to go over some clips this evening from the recent debate between Sandra Biagetti and Brian Murray for the state rep race, and Ryan Fatman and Tom Morale for the state senate race, put on by the citizens for Milford. We have some clips from that were done by Milford TV. So let's just dive right in. Welcome, Christine.
Hi.
Welcome, Kevin. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, John. Good to be here.
So let's dive right in with our first clip. In this one, we have Sandra Biagetti's answer on question 3 at the debate. So RJ, if you could bring up clip 03A, Biagetti question 3.
I've actually gone back and forth on this because I have heard of some incidents that have happened, but I do have to say that I agree with Brian as far as being able to keep that law into effect for all of the same reasons. I've leaned towards saying yes.
So here she says that she's leaned towards saying yes, or that she supports the law for all the same reasons as Brian supports it. And then what happens the next day?
She retracted everything.
Right.
She completely said that she's not going to support question 3. She wants it both ways.
Apparently, yeah. The way that I put it on one of our chat threads was apparently she caught herself expressing some humanity. And we all know that on the Republican side of the aisle, you just can't do that.
You know, I went up to her after the debate and had asked her about that because I said she had mentioned she was going to she was going to vote for question 3 and support it. And I said, that's not how you left it. You left it that you were leaning toward supporting it. And she didn't even realize, I mean, it was more, she was surprised, and I said, I really heard that. And I said, you may want to check what you said. You know, you got to speak from the heart. And she was just all over the map with that question. She really floundered a lot.
Yeah, and then the next day she floundered
Completely
even
retracted
worse.
it.
Kevin, your thoughts?
Well, she stated that she was getting behind it for the same reasons that Brian was. And one of the reasons Brian stated was that it would be discriminatory. So how can you discriminate one day and not discriminate the next day and then go back to discriminating against? This is what she's done. So it's the right thing to do. She should have stuck with that. We saw a human moment, an honest human moment from her right then and there. And somebody got to her afterwards.
Yeah, unfortunately, she had to retract that.
So how do you have faith in what she says? And how can you really trust when she says one thing that she's going to follow through?
Yeah, right, exactly. So it's a tough call, but I have to say that she really did not represent herself well, and certainly the news that she made the next day, retracting her position like that was really kind of silly on her part. Yeah. So the next clip that we'd like to discuss is Brian Murray actually answering my question. I got to ask a question at the debate. I asked him to explain the toll bill. A lot of people out here in Metro West were concerned when they heard that Brian wanted to sponsor a toll bill that would incur tolls on all of the Massachusetts highways. And he's gotten a lot of bad press for that because the Mass Fiscal Alliance and those other groups, those other dark money groups, have been critical of him for trying to raise tolls. And I wanted Brian to have an opportunity to set the record straight. RJ, if you could pull up 04A, Murray on the toll bill, please.
That was a bill that I filed, and it got misrepresented by, I would say, folks on the other side of the political spectrum. It's really an extension of what the Metro West Legislative Caucus has been trying to do for years. As all of us in this room know, the toll burden falls unfairly on the Central Mass and the Western Mass driver. For years, the Metro West Caucus, the Legislative Caucus, has tried to get that changed, get tolls removed. And they've been doing it in a very polite way. they've been saying, please remove our tolls. The problem with that is that legislators from the north of Boston and the south of Boston really don't care what you folks have to deal with every day. There's no leverage. So what I did was I tried to attack the issue differently and file a bill that says, okay, let's put tolls north of Boston, south of Boston, so now all of you legislators get to hear from your constituents what we have to deal with all the time. When I testified before the Committee on Transportation, I said that that bill was a purpose bill. And the purpose was to show other legislators what we face in Central Mass.
So there we have it. That's exactly why Brian filed that bill. He wants parity. Right now, people from this part of the state, when we have to go to Boston, we're paying for the Big Dig. Who's using the Big Dig? People on Route 93. No, they're not on the Mass Pike. 93 is the Big Dig. And yes, there is a toll when you go use the tunnel to go over to Logan Airport. And certainly that's fair. But the people that use 93 should be paying tolls as well to pay for that Big Dig. And it's unfair to place that burden on everybody out here who uses the pike.
That was a great way of making a point. And using a different tack was very clever, I thought.
Exactly. Yeah, and I really thought that it was a great idea. Sandra Biagetti, on the other hand, she thought that that it would be unfair that if you get off the pike and you get onto 128, that you get another toll. I'm sure that his bill wasn't crafted that way. It was crafted such that there would be toll parity all around.
But it sounds like the point he was making was that it's not necessarily that he wants to make this bill go through. He just wanted to demonstrate how it's going to impact people and what we have to deal with. So it's, like you said, a little bit of parity. And there's alternate routes to go to. You don't always have to use the pike.
Right.
So people can always avoid the tolls if they want.
I find myself using Route 16 often. Sometimes it's not as crowded as the pike,
Yeah,
depending on time of day, et cetera. Kevin, your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, if Brian's purpose was to, give these colleagues of his a little taste of what it's like to have to listen to constituents complain about the tolls, and then I think he served his purpose. But I'm not surprised that someone, would take an action like that wasn't really intended to go anywhere, to try to paint Brian as some kind of a tax and spend guy.
And that's exactly what they did.
Right,
That's
and
exactly what the Fiscal Alliance, the Mass Fiscal Alliance did, was here's Brian Murray raising your tolls.
Right.
Well, that's the concerning thing, where there's no critical thinking anymore, is that they can use these sound bites and these kind of veneer of an issue and incite people, and then nobody stops to think about, wait a minute, okay, let me dig a little more. I mean, at least as best I can, you try to dig a little more just to kind of get the whole story. There's always two sides.
Right. So, moving on, we have another clip that I'd like to show. Some people might think that this is unfair, but I think it goes to the heart of whether or not Sandra Biagetti is ready to be a state rep. RJ, if you could bring up clip 14A, please.
What type of legislation would you advocate for in your first term as a legislator should you be elected, and why?
Oh, that's a tough one. Well, I must say I'm stuck on that one.
Okay.
I'm stuck on that one.
It's uncomfortable.
I would say that's a case of once bitten, twice shy. She probably was afraid of making yet another statement that she may have to change the next day.
That could well be.
I can sympathize with her. I've been a candidate. I've been in that position. You get nervous. Sometimes you just draw a blank. I understand that. But she took quite a while to think, and to not even be able to come up with one issue that she would champion in her first term, I think, in a sense, shows that she's not quite ready for prime time.
Right.
It shows a lack of understanding of what the needs of her community are. If you can't come up with one thing, you've been campaigning. This is her second round now. She was a candidate last term.
Right, last cycle.
Right, and now she's a candidate again. You would hope that somebody who's running would have at least a few ideas and understanding on what's on people's minds and what you're going to champion for them.
Yeah. The worst part of it to me is that they were asked a very similar question earlier. And she did say something along the lines of
Car
some kind of
insurance.
car insurance, auto insurance
And that's
reform.
with her, yeah.
And that seems to be her strong suit, is that, in her career, she works in the auto insurance industry. So at minimum, you would think that she could come up with a similar answer to what she came up with
Right.
earlier.
That's what I was expecting her to say when she was asked the
Exactly,
question. I'm
yeah.
like, this is an easy one. She just
I
said
know.
it 5 minutes ago, so.
So again, it's just not ready for prime time, and as much as it might seem cruel to put that on there, it's what she did during the debate. That's not on me. I wasn't the one on stage whiffing on the answer to a fairly simple question, and one that any candidate for office should really be ready for, you would think.
Yeah.
So, and then Brian also had some comments about the supposed pay raise. That's yet another issue that the Mass Fiscal Alliance loves to harp on and loves to misrepresent to the people. So, RJ, if you could bring up clip 06A, please.
My opponent talks about something that was voted on December 2016. I didn't get sworn in as a legislator until January 4th, 2017. Okay, so I mean, that the salary that I got as swearing in is still the same salary. Okay, it was a stipend increase, and if any of you are teachers, you understand what it is. You have a base salary, and then if you want to take on additional obligations like maybe coaching or running the music club or science club, there's a stipend for that added responsibility. That's the way the legislature is as well. The chairman jobs are tremendously time-consuming. The Speaker of the House basically is one of the top 3 people in the state that runs a $40 million budget. The stipend goes to those people. And the law also, it should be pointed out, precludes the leadership positions from taking any other employment, any other job. So this is their sole job. So I didn't vote myself a salary increase. I didn't get a salary increase from the day I was signed in.
And so, there we have it. That's a pretty concise and clear explanation of the pay raise issue.
It doesn't matter. The other side is not going to even acknowledge that. It's clarifying it for everybody else who's a little more open-minded, because that came out, I remember, was it even the last election cycle that they...
No, because it happened, I think the change actually happened in December after after the election in
all right,
November
so, yeah, but
2016.
it was a while ago that they had sent
Oh,
that
sure,
out, because
yeah.
I remember reading that, and there was no detail. It was just Brian Murray voted himself in an increase.
Right, and that's
40% is what they had said.
sure, and that again is the Mass Fiscal Alliance
Right.
really misrepresenting the facts.
Right.
Right.
And he's absolutely right too about the same thing. If you're a teacher and you take on extra responsibilities, you get a stipend for that, and it's the same type of thing. That
The other thing he had said, though, is that they had not increased that stipend in 30 years?
From the 80s, I thought
In the
he said.
80s.
yeah,
There had been no change.
Right.
Sadly, I mean, because what happens is they make a big change like that, all of a sudden it's news, instead of allowing a cost of living increase or something like that, but,
sure. Well, the same thing happened with the gas tax last cycle, right? They put through legislation to index the gas tax to inflation, which makes sense because the gas tax pays for our roads, and how else are we going to pay for our roads unless we, tax the people that use them, and those are the people that are using gasoline. The whole thing just flies in the face of logic. Their whole approach. The gas tax needed to be fixed. I don't think it's been raised since 1992. The cost of asphalt has certainly gone up. The cost of labor has certainly gone up. Those are the types of things that we have to do. They pushed through that question to repeal the automatically increasing gas tax, which I think was kind of a bad thing too. Because I mean, you want your roads to be well maintained. Otherwise, how much are you paying to maintain your car?
everybody wants the services, they don't want to pay for them.
Yeah.
So I'll just quickly say, I mean, they took what was actually a fact. Yes, the legislature voted a pay raise. That simple sentence right there is true. However, they make it sound like Brian Murray and Jeff Roy, stuffed a pay raise in their pocket
Right.
each week and went on their merry way. Not the case.
Yeah.
If they had just stuck to the facts, they might actually have an issue by saying, listen, we don't think the leadership should have gotten a raise. Okay, do that.
You're right.
But don't paint
Misrepresent.
Brian and John Fernandez, I think, got caught in this mess too. But enough said.
All right, and then the last clip that we're going to cover on the Biaggetti and Murray debate is Brian Murray's closing, which was really stellar. I really do. Brian has just been so ready to be our state representative. How long did he serve on the school board? 12 years?
I think he said 12 years.
16 years as a selectman. He is absolutely the person that we want out of these two to be representing this area. RJ, if you want to go ahead and play clip 15A, Murray's closing.
When you consider who you're going to vote for, I ask you to consider that my opponent has received over 74% of her campaign donations from outside of the district. And that includes $1,000 from the Marlboro Republican Committee, as well as over $6,300 from Marlboro in terms of donated services to her campaign. Why is Marlboro so interested in having control over our particular district? Ask yourself that question. We are competitors with Marlboro for economic development. Businesses that look at Milford, they look at Marlboro, they look at Westboro. I'm looking for businesses to come here. I have no influence from Marlboro. I'm here totally to represent all of you. That's what I've done, and that's what I'll continue to do, and I ask for your support.
So that wasn't the entire closing. That was my mistake. That was the last 1 minute of the closing or thereabouts, in which he did talk about the issues with her campaign finance.
And the Marlboro Republican City Committee they have a reputation for donating pretty good chunks of money to many Republicans, including the Republican from my district that's running in this race as well. They either give it in cash or in kind. This is a Republican city committee that has tens of thousands of dollars. I'm the chairman of my town committee. We've got about $150.
Well, and being the chair of mine too, I mean, we have maybe a couple hundred more than you. This money has to be coming from somewhere. Does Marlboro have that many people that have the means? And what is it, a $5,000 per year limit you could donate to your town committee?
Sure.
Per person?
I believe.
I mean, that's quite a lot of money they have.
In Ryan Fatman's race against Dick Moore in 2014, if I'm not mistaken, the Marlboro City Committee donated $85,000 for a billboard or in-kind contributions to Ryan Fatman's campaign.
So they must be getting it from elsewhere, that must be their port of call, so to speak, I guess, right?
Isn't that where Cruz went? He kind of snuck into town a couple of years ago to do a fundraiser.
Really?
Yeah.
Ted Cruz?
Ted Cruz.
No kidding?
Yeah.
Wow.
So
I'll have to I'll do some more research on that, but
Yeah.
he snuck into Massachusetts and met with, I thought it was the Marlboro Republican City Committee,
Okay.
but I'll have to check and make sure on that. I don't want to.
that's,
I don't want to be factual.
is it centralized, I wonder if it's because, I mean, I'm just trying to think of the reason why Marlboro.
Yeah. Why
You know?
Marlboro?
Yeah.
And
That's
is it just
interesting.
enough under the radar?
Yeah. I had no idea Ted Cruz was in town. Had I known, I would have been happy to go protest.
This was a couple of years ago,
Yeah.
mind you.
Yeah. He was always been Ted Cruz, though, and I would have been happy to protest. So, so let's move on from the state rep race and get into the meat of the evening, which was the debate between Tom Morale and Ryan Fatman. First off, the first thing that I want to talk about on this is Ryan's reprehensible comments from 2011 about how a woman who is here illegally should be afraid to come forward to the police if she's been assaulted. Someone questioned him about that at the debate, and here's the salient part of Ryan's answer to that.
Well, I appreciate the question, though a little unfair. First of all, that quote, what was reportedly said was that if a legal immigrant was raped, she should be afraid to come forward. That's what they said that I said. I did not say that. It has been clarified in actually 5 different news publications that that's not what I said. And after I read it, I actually went to the Telegram and said, this isn't what I said. And they wrote another story about that. What I did say was, if they were raped and they were here illegally, they would be afraid to come forward.
So he claims now that he said they would be afraid to come forward. Well, we have the receipts on this. The June 8th article in the Telegram and Gazette. My thought is that if someone is here illegally, they should be afraid to come forward. If you do it the right way, you don't have to be concerned about these things. That is in quotes in that article. So if Ryan had an issue with the quotes in that article, he could certainly take that up with the Telegram and Gazette. He also said that even though citizens have the right to be viewed as innocent until found guilty in court, he said, I don't think that principle extends to illegal immigrants. Well, innocent until proven guilty applies to everybody in the United States.
I guess not in Ryan's world.
Not in Ryan's world. And the last thing that he said also, which is, again, an egregious comment on his part, if they are here illegally, they have committed a crime. So our state senator doesn't even understand that immigration is a civil matter, not a criminal matter. That's what happened on June 8th of 2011. On June 9th of 2011, we have here an article from Mother Jones magazine in which a Mother Jones reporter called Ryan, and he doubled down on those comments, saying, of course, anyone who was raped and molested or injured in any way should report it regardless of their status. What I did say is that the Secure Communities program does not address that. The Secure Communities program would cause the police to deport people or to report people who are here illegally. So it does address that. And he says, if someone got into a car accident, it's obviously a tragic event, but if they're drunk and they crash, it's a crime. So if that person was drunk and survived the accident, they would be afraid to come forward. Theirs would be. But then he says, I think if someone is here illegally, they should be afraid to come forward because they should be afraid to be deported. The reporter even asked him, that analogy
So he
you're
didn't
making.
step back at all from that.
Yeah, he
and
didn't
just-
step back at all.
And
Yeah.
that was just a couple days after the original one.
Right, and the reporter, asked him about, this is the person in the car accident who was drinking. They've committed a crime.
Right.
And
You're
he
turning a
just-
victim into the perpetrator
Exactly.
then, in a sense, that kind of twisting things around.
Exactly.
But they already get treated like that, women who have been assaulted,
Right.
sadly,
Right.
without having that added pressure,
It's bad enough. But then on the 21st of June, the Telegram and Gazette did publish a clarification of Ryan's remarks.
This is the one that he referenced.
This
right?
is
When
what he
said,
was
I called
referencing.
them and they wrote another story. This
Right,
is it? Okay.
right. This is what he was referencing. He did revise his comments. In the article where they talk about his revision to his comments, which came under massive pressure from both Human Rights Watch, from Rape Crisis Center of Central
Hope.
Mass, from a Change.org petition that was gathering thousands of signatures.
So he
There's
got a
about
lot of
4,500
backlash on
signatures.
this.
He got a real lot of backlash. He revised his comments. In the article where they talked about his revision to his comments, they quoted it again, that they should be afraid to come forward. Nowhere does it say that we have to correct the record. He said they would
Right.
be afraid to come forward. Nowhere at all. Further, he went on in his debate answer the other night. He talked about U visas and how U visas are a solution for this issue. In June of 2011, he said nothing about U visas. There's no record anywhere of him saying anything about U visas at that time.
Could you refresh our memory as to what a U visa is?
A U visa allows a victim of violent crime to apply for a visa to stay here legally, okay? There are 10,000 U visas issued annually in the United States. There's a current backlog of 64,000 applications for U visas. It's not a solution. It's certainly not the panacea that Ryan likes to think it is or would want to represent to the public that it is.
So just so I understand, is he trying to say that for a rape victim, that they get raped, instead of going to the police, they can get a U visa, or what was he trying to use
when
that?
they go to the police,
Okay.
and it's found out that they're here illegally,
Mm-hmm.
then that person could apply for a U visa. But if the backlog is 64,000 and
Well,
they issue
and in his
10,000 a
world-
year, that's 6.5
If
years.
they're afraid to come forward, then they're certainly not going to get the U visa either, if that's
Exactly.
in his world. But-
Exactly. Yeah, it's a real shame that Ryan feels this way, and he's doubling down on it all the time, and now he's flat out lying to us about that. I was looking forward to our next debate because I want to ask him another question about this, but who knows if Ryan's going to actually show up for any of our remaining debates
Did you have the
in this
clip on
race.
the look on his face when the other debates were mentioned? I don't know that he's going to show up. I don't.
I know that Tom mentioned the next debates
Tomorrow
in his closing remarks, but I believe that the camera was on Tom at the
Okay.
time, so there's no
No, I
record of what Ryan was looking like.
don't think Ryan likes to be called out on things. I don't think he likes to be questioned. Who does that remind you of?
Well,
I'm just, it's
I'm-
right there.
It's right there, tip of my
Right.
tongue, and you know he has a
Doesn't, he's got a thin skin.
yeah, he's got a nickname for Tom. He calls him Tom Taxes.
Okay,
So-
so somebody that likes nicknames, that doesn't tell the truth all the time. There's somebody very familiar.
Republican.
Yeah, he's a Republican.
Yeah.
I don't know.
We'll just have to think about that for a
Yeah.
while.
It'll come to me.
Wake up screaming in the night, I'm sure.
You know, sadly though, they're picking up on all these tactics that the White House is using, just the twisting of the lies and the insistent and just the shameless information that's so misled.
Well, you know, if you feel that your position is right and just the right thing to do, why do you have to lie about it to get people to come to your side?
Right.
Why do you have to exaggerate to get people to come to your side? If it's the right thing to do, tell them why, and then they'll come to you.
Well, here's the thing, Kevin. The Republicans get themselves elected by appealing to people's emotions.
Yeah.
Not by appealing to their logical brain, but by appealing to emotion, getting people emotionally worked up. I used to work for a solar power firm in Boston. I worked for them for 2 whole months, and I walked off the job because I couldn't do it anymore. They did their sales tactics the same way. Get people angry, and they'll sign up.
Or fearful.
Or fearful.
That's
But,
that's
yeah,
what
fearful.
Sandra Biagetti attempted to do. Her talking points are really about the what ifs, you know, and she'd use an anecdote that may or may not have happened, but all it was an anecdote. It wasn't a factual say that this is happening all the time, kind of like the question 3.
Well, on question 3, she said something along the lines of, I've heard of incidents
Right.
that have happened.
I have too, but is that ever related to the question?
Right.
You know, she's not making that connection at all.
Right.
So that's the thing that's frustrating is these broad brush statements, these generalities, anecdotal incidents that are not quite correct anyway.
Yeah. So let's move on to our next clip from the Morali and Fatman debate, and this one had to do with question 3. RJ, if you could bring up 04A, Ryan's answer on question 3, or at least part of it.
As some of you know, I'm on the record of voting no on the original bill. My reason for that and why I will vote no this time was the legal definition. You know, we created a legal definition that says if you have a sincere belief that you are, then you have access to public accommodations. We had offered amendments to try to change that. For example, changing her name legally through the Office of Probate and Family Court, going through hormone treatments as evidence, going through a sex change. These definitions did not qualify. I think that sincere belief is too broad. And lastly, there is a pretty harsh penalty of $50,000 in a civil fine if you are accused of discrimination. And just by way of example, this is a real case that's happening in the Massachusetts court system right now. A man entered a spa who was a woman, identified as a woman, and when he asked to get his genitalia waxed, the woman refused to do it who was with him. And she is now going before court to be prosecuted and have a $50,000 fine pending before her.
So, a lot to unpack here.
Lots to unpack. The $50,000 civil fine is true. However, it is a civil fine, and it only applies to businesses who have already, within the past 7 years, had complaints of discrimination against them on 3 separate occasions. So you got to have a pretty good track record to get up to that $50,000
Okay.
threshold. The senator makes it sound like any person that tries to prevent a child molester from going into a woman's bathroom is going to be fined $50,000. He
Well-
mentions and he mentions the word prosecute. This is not a current case. A complaint was filed by the transgender person. He withdrew it about 3 weeks later.
Okay.
So there is no current case. That's factually wrong. And even if he was going forward with the case, it is a civil matter. Nobody gets prosecuted for that. You can be prosecuted if you try to prevent a transgender person from going about their life and going into the restroom of which they identify. If you try to prevent that person from going in there, you can be charged. And you can suffer a penalty of up to $2,500
Okay.
and a year in jail. Now, nobody's going to go to jail for that. I can tell you as a practicing attorney, it just doesn't happen. But it is written into the law that way. So the senator has his criminal and his civil facts inaccurate
Again,
but there is a line of truth in the $50,000 figure that he does quote, because I looked at it in the law again, and it is in there.
Okay.
So.
well, that's part of the problem with Brian, is that everything that he says has a grain of truth somewhere in it. We'll get to another case like that in a little while, where there's a grain of truth, and then he exaggerates the whole thing.
Well, you know, he talked about people, there's certain criteria that he was saying that should establish whether or not you qualify as being a transgender. He said your feeling is just not enough. Well, apparently he uses, though, that same feeling about being able to prosecute people, too. I mean, wouldn't it have to weigh more just to say, you know, he said, she said, wouldn't somebody, if they're filing a complaint about somebody, have to have proof, right? Either way, whether or not you're, he wants it both ways. You know,
Right,
I'm probably not explaining that right, but I'm trying to say that it just feels as though the transgender person, according to him, it's too flimsy unless he's going through a sex change or he's going through hormone treatments or something documented.
Or even worse, if they go to probate and get their name changed, right? His wife is the register of probate. She's denied name changes to transgender individuals. I know a family here in town where it's happened to them.
Is that legal if somebody requests a name change?
She forces
Are you allowed to have...
she forces them to comply with to the letter of the law, all the way down with advertising, et cetera. This particular individual was going to college and just wanted to be able to go to the correct dorm in college, and didn't want to go through the whole advertising rigmarole, et cetera. And she just absolutely could not grant an exception.
I'm wondering if there's any cases where they didn't have to do all the dance steps exactly and have been granted that. I just didn't. I have no idea what the process is like.
I would
to
wager
change
to
your name.
I would wager to say that there are those cases outside of Worcester County where Stephanie Fatman is not the register of probate.
And you know, I don't want to be cynical here, but even if the senator's amendments did pass and people changed their names and did hormone treatments and got a sex change, do you really think that's going to change anything?
Yeah.
They would still be against those people going into the restroom or a locker room of their choice.
Sure.
I heard Washington, or the Trump administration, is looking to try to change the definition of what a transgender is, trying to get that done at the back end.
Sure. This hits close to home for me, too. I have a transgendered relative, and she's gone through quite a bit in her life and doesn't need this kind of hassle in her life. And you know, I feel a real disgust at people who you know, who proselytize on this issue along these lines. I actually had to shut someone down one time on a post on Blue Mask Group by just saying to them, look, you act as though people are doing these willy-nilly. They're saying, oh, I'm a girl today, and running into the girls' room. That's not the case. Transgendered individuals go through an enormous amount of angst and the emotions that are involved are nothing easy. There's nothing easy or quick about this, and you know, to see people being treated unfairly, it just really rankles me.
Yeah, you know, life is tough enough for all of us, but you know, some of us have different challenges.
Sure.
You know, and the senator could only come up with that one anecdote that wasn't even accurate. Where are all these stories
Right.
of the sex offenders, peeking over the partition in the women's room. Do you know if that's their logo? Have you seen this?
No.
Yes.
Oh, geez, no.
It's the, I don't know what you call it, John. It's like the shadow picture of a person.
Right.
There's no, and it's a side view of a man standing on a toilet, peeking over the partition into the next stall where there's a woman sitting on the toilet. That's their logo of the people that want to push this. And these are the kind of people that we're dealing with, and yet there have been no stories about this that I can think of or have, and I've done some research on it, and certainly the senator only came up with one, and it was pretty bogus at that.
There's been no uptick in instances since this law's been on the books, right? Since 2016?
Right.
And even in North Carolina, remember when that happened, the bathroom bill, and
Oh, yeah.
Springsteen pulled out and all
Yep,
this?
yep.
They haven't had any problems down there.
Most of the
So-
peeping toms are heterosexual. I just want to, I mean,
Yeah.
as sex offenders, don't even get me started about, people have this idea that if you're transgender, if you're gay or lesbian, you're also clumped into that is you're a sex offender. And that is so far from the case.
Right.
They're two separate issues. And that-
Absolutely.
Anyway,
RJ, why don't we bring up Tom's reply on question 304A. Tom, on question 3, please.
I think the fact that we're trying to repeal a landmark civil rights legislation is pretty disgusting, actually. And I fully support question 3. Of course, it's up to the people, and I will fully implement whatever the will of the people might be, because we're a democracy. But I do support question 3.
So, great answer from Tom. We're a democracy. What else can you say? We are a democracy. Transgendered
at
individuals
least
are
for
here.
today, for now.
Yeah.
I don't know what direction we're going in, but
My wife was a medical student. She isn't a doctor, but because she didn't graduate, but she was a medical student, and she talks about transgender issues, and she talks about all the various combinations of the XY gene that leads to, or the XY chromosome that leads to transgender individuals. And there's XXY, there's YXX, there's all these different combinations that happen, and something along the lines of 1 in 100,000 live births will end up with what they call ambiguous genitalia. It is what it is. It's part of the human condition. It's every bit as much a part of the human condition as breathing is. It's natural and it happens.
so we have shades of gray is what you're saying.
Pretty
Things
much,
are not
yeah.
black and white.
Things are not black and white.
And I'm glad that Tom referred to it as landmark legislation, because if this question is voted down, the whole country is watching us, as they
As they always do.
usually do, because we lead the way in so many different ways.
Right.
They're going to be watching us, and if they see this question go down, they're either not going to have the courage to go forward and pass their own law, or they're going to try to do a repeal of whatever they happen to have on their books too. So people, the nation's
Texas
watching
repealed
us.
it, didn't they?
I'm
I
not
think
sure.
they had, I was talking with somebody who was representing question 3, and she was saying that I thought that in Texas, they had a similar situation there, where they were trying to repeal a law like this, and the polling was really challenging, it was back and forth, because, when the supporters of question 3 would come out and put their thing out, the people who were paying to have it repealed would wait, and they would come out just in a timely manner. They had a lot of funds, and again, like this dark money.
It's dark money.
I just
Exactly.
don't understand what the purpose and what people gain from not allowing this law to continue.
It's divisive. It's an emotional appeal to divisiveness.
But what is their goal? I just don't understand. How does this impact people, really, at the end of the day?
I've seen transgender people on Twitter saying, "Look, all we want to do is pee."
Really? Well, why do we even have separate bathrooms? Can't we just have all stalls? Do you have a urinal in your home? Do you have a urinal in your?
No.
Right?
Yeah.
Just have all stalls. Make it easy. Wouldn't it be cheaper?
It would be.
And
It
the
would be.
lines,
The
the
reason-
ladies' room lines.
The reason we have separate bathrooms is, I believe it goes back to the late 19th century when women joined the workforce. And in those days, they thought that women being the weaker sex or the fairer sex or whatever, that they needed separate facilities, and so they started instituting separate facilities, and it's kind of just been that way ever since. Kind of that's the way we've always done it type of thing, and that's that's really why we have that today. But unisex bathrooms, I mean, like you
You
say,
see
I have one in my house, you have one in
That's right,
yours.
really.
It is what it is. We
I
all
know.
got to pee. So let's move on to
Okay.
our next topic. We have some discussion on healthcare. RJ, if you could bring up 06A healthcare.
Peace thinks that it's good to go to a single-payer healthcare system, which estimates out there are $35 billion.
I'd like to say something about the healthcare costs in particular. There was an amendment passed on an omnibus healthcare bill in the last session that would have actually studied the cost of moving towards a single-payer system, what the cost savings would be for the average consumer, and that was the responsible way to determine what the cost of moving towards such a system would be. You voted against that study. You're one of 3 senators to do so. So instead of actually looking at what we could do to save costs, you just knee-jerk vote against it.
No, I just don't think we should get anywhere near a single-payer system. You look around the world, Canada, other parts of Europe, they come here for their health care when it's an emergency.
All right, hold off. Come on. Please. No, audience, please.
I'm just curious how many people have relatives that live abroad. I'm from Canada. So my aunt and uncle live in Denmark.
All right, okay, hold on. Please.
There are
Please.
wait lines in other countries for simple procedures like a rotator
There's
cuff.
wait lines
And-
in Milford Hospital.
Excuse me, please.
So Jose Costa from CFM really got kind of perturbed with the audience at that point. But what Ryan was saying was not true. And it's never been true.
No.
The National Institutes of Health in Great Britain, that got started in 1948 as a reply to World War II. Britain had just been through a horrific mess, and a lot of people were injured and sick and needed care. They've had the NIH ever since. They
A
love
lot
it
of
over
countries
there.
had for a long time. They had the Bismarck plan in Germany and France.
Yeah.
Japan has national health care, Canada. And there's pros and cons. I'm sure it's not a perfect system anywhere. However, the cost of medical care is in single digits in other developed countries. We have double digits in our GDP. I mean, that is a huge bulk.
Something along the lines of 18% of the GDP in the United States is devoted to healthcare.
Actually, I thought it was higher than that.
Is it?
But I don't. There's a book out there, a really good book called The Healing of America. Reed was the author. He went around to all the different countries and compared and looked at all the different services and pros and cons, and then included the United States too. And then he also did a breakdown of the Affordable Care Act, which was really, it was a very good book, well written, well researched too. And it shows how much more services and access to services. We have health care. No, we have health insurance. Access to the health care that's where the disconnect
That's
is.
exactly. Yeah. I know you couldn't hear it on the clip, but my wife was sitting next to me and I heard it. During the laughter there, she said, people die in the United States, and that's true.
Whoa.
It's estimated that 17,000 people die annually for lack of health care in the United States.
Isn't the child mortality rate higher now in the United States? It's gone up over the years.
Infant
compared to-
mortality and maternal mortality
That's right.
are terrible in Texas. In Texas, they have a higher infant mortality than in many third
Well,
world
they don't
nations.
have access to women's health care.
Exactly.
Or, they're not pro-choice, and so they've had a lot of barriers to women getting services there.
Yeah.
Well, I thought it was interesting that Tom pointed out that Senator Fatman wouldn't even vote for a study.
Right.
I mean, you know, because why? Because he doesn't want to get anywhere near health care. In other words, he doesn't want to get anywhere near the possible truth,
Right, right.
you know?
So how
because
much is
that's what-
contributed to his campaign by the
By the-
insurance
by the
companies?
healthcare
and
industry.
healthcare
Something in it too.
industries?
Although I would be interested to know, I mean, it sounds to me from Tom that bill passed, so I don't know if a commission was assembled, and if they did do a study, I'd like to see what it said.
Sure.
You know,
sure.
maybe the senator could get a copy of that.
Well, I'd like to know where the senator got his statistics from too. He said, mentioned some vague study or some.
Yeah, costing $35 billion.
Right, and I'd just
yeah.
be curious what he's basing that on.
Yeah. Another thing, too, in those other nations, Canada, England, et cetera, medical bankruptcies, zero. how many medical bankruptcies in this
Oh, my
country? I think
God.
there was
Well, look at
656,000
Sicko,
last
that
year.
movie that Michael Moore did
Sure,
on Sicko.
Sicko,
He's just
yeah,
talking
a
about a lot.
great movie, yeah, yeah. That and Food Inc. is another one. Food Inc. made me afraid to eat. Why don't we move on? We had a pretty funny question come up here. I believe it was a Ryan supporter with a planted question, and let's watch the clip. 10A, please, RJ.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Groot. I'm from Uxbridge. I just wanted to apologize to you on behalf of the people here and all of us who are being disrespectful and mocking. I also want to say a quick comment. I'm from Uxbridge. I have not heard about the water issue, so I don't know if you want to explain about that. But also, my question is to Senator Fatman, and I was wondering what's the legislator that you're most proud of?
Bill?
Yeah, sorry.
Thanks for the question. First of all, I grew up with the last name Fat Man and prepared me well for politics. I can take anything, believe me.
Whoops, we missed part of it there. At the end there, I was just splicing in a clip where he said, "The piece of legislation that I'm most proud of." And he had to think. There was a nice pregnant pause there for a little while so he could think of the legislation that he was most proud of. And it turns out that he's most proud of a bill that gave criminal records to people who were found not guilty of crime by reason of mental defect. I don't know that that's something that I'd be proud of, but Ryan is certainly very proud of that legislation. And I love the fact that he had to correct the question in order to make sure that he got the right question from the podium. I thought that was very telling. Not that we weren't there and asking questions. We asked our own pointed questions, and I just think that particular example of
She
him,
didn't rehearse her line well enough.
exactly, and he had to correct the question before he could answer. That was pretty funny.
Well, I'm intrigued, and maybe I need to go back to law school, but in this state, when you are charged with a crime, whether you're insane or not, you go in front of a judge and you are arraigned for that crime. That establishes a criminal record. Now, as the case moves forward, you could be found criminally insane and therefore not, quote, not guilty for that reason. But you have a criminal record from the very first day
That's right.
you went to court. So I'm not sure, I guess that's not enough for Ryan. I guess he wants, their record to be, made public in the newspapers or something to give people peace of mind that this, quote, crazy person is a criminal. But it's just another factual thing that Ryan has wrong. If he wants them to have criminal records, it was done way before Ryan Fatman came along.
So I know you can look up any arrests, any arraignments or whatever. That doesn't mean, like you said, you're guilty or not. But so what is he trying to do? It feels like he's putting barriers to these people's ability maybe to get work later, or what kind of, could it be some little crime? I mean, that's kind of not fair when you think about if they've been not guilty by reason of insanity. Okay, they still have a record. There's still something on their Corey. That's not going to go away.
Right.
And then
Well, here's
how
the
does
thing.
that impact them?
He actually went on to cite an example in his answer to this question, which again, when Ryan cites examples, you want to take them with a grain of salt and take a look at them and see what this example actually is. He cited the case of a woman in Boston who drowned 4 children, and then 8 years later was found working at a children's hospital. He didn't say Boston Children's Hospital, but he said a children's hospital in Boston. There is, of course, a grain of truth in here. There was a case, a woman named Angela Vasquez. She had a psychotic break from reality and said something along the lines of, Jesus told her to kill her children to protect them from Satan. And the police came to her house after a therapist called to say, you need to do a wellness check on this person because I'm concerned about what's going on over there. They came in the house, they found that she had slashes up and down her arms and she had killed her 2 children. And the children's bodies were there, bloated and in a horrible situation, absolutely a horrible situation. That woman, 8 years later, was seen by somebody working at the admissions desk at Faulkner Hospital which is a Brigham and Women's Hospital in Boston. So she didn't drown 4 children. She did kill 2 children. Faulkner Hospital does not have a pediatric unit. It's not a children's hospital in Boston. And Ryan alluded to her chaperoning children at the hospital or chaperoning a high school dance or something along those lines. The administrators at Faulkner Hospital said that they support people who are in this situation and want to help them to return to be productive members of society.
So he uses an isolated example incorrectly and
Exaggerates
about
it.
why the need to have people have criminal records that have been insane. How often does this happen, number one? I mean, seriously, how,
It's very rare for a jury to actually find someone not guilty by reason of
that's a
mental
tough
defect.
one to
It really is.
It is,
Yeah.
you're right.
It's a
So
huge challenge.
how important is that? Aren't there, and I don't want to minimize, a horrible thing that happened, and, it's sad that somebody goes through something like that, but how much time and effort is he going to put on these anecdotal, isolated incidents and not work on some of the bigger issues that we have facing here
Sure.
in this area? I mean, these seem to be personal agendas he has and not the needs of his constituents.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the divisive tactics again. That's what his
And
whole-
fear.
whole claim to fame is divisiveness and fearful rhetoric.
Now, see, he's been a senator 4 years, and the schools have been going downhill in our communities. I know that Millville, Blackstone had a financial issue. They had to vote an override, which failed. So they've lost their senior center. Where's Ryan been
Right.
for these things? That just didn't happen overnight.
Right. And during the debate, he also said something along the lines of, well, I've been to 841 events.
Right, he's had his photo taken at every one of those.
Exactly.
What has he done?
What has he done? He's been at 841 photo ops. Has he
But he
been?
doesn't have time to go to his district office and meet with people one-on-one.
Right. Has he been to a Board of Selectmen meeting where they're discussing the budget? Has he been to a school committee meeting where they're discussing the budget? Has he done anything? I would love to know out of those
But
841
he's been at
events.
every voting record.
He does get a participation trophy for showing up to work, yes.
He
You-
seemed
my
to
s-
throw the entire Board of Selectmen in Millville under the bus, too, by saying that, well, he was trying to communicate with them, but they just wouldn't communicate back. And the only one selectman he mentioned was this young guy named Allward, who was, I believe, a Tea Partier
Okay.
type guy. But he basically blamed the selectmen for him not going to their meetings.
So really, he wasn't able to drive up himself and walk through the door? Those are public, open meetings, right?
Yeah.
Theoretically, anybody could show up.
Right.
Yeah, I did.
Let's move along. RJ, if we could bring up, Tom showed a chart showing where this district ranks in funding provided by the state. If you could bring up 07A, Tom shows district ranking.
I have a breakdown here of the grants awarded to each district in the state over the past legislative session, and our district ranks number 31. There are 40 Senate districts. I think we can do better. I think we need to more aggressively push for infrastructure investment. I think that we need to push to invest in our water infrastructure as a whole in this state. When you have towns like Uxbridge, which are suffering from a water crisis, businesses aren't going to move in to the degree that they need to. And you look at 146, there's so much potential there. There's so much potential there.
So we are almost out of time. We have 5 minutes left, and I do want to cover Tom's closing remarks, which is 2 minutes long. So just really briefly on this topic.
Enough said, I mean,
Yeah,
31st out of 40, and where's the money?
yeah, we could do better.
Well, in the senator's defense, I guess he could say that being one of 6 Republicans in the Senate, he was outnumbered or whatever he wants to say.
Or he was
But there's
ineffective,
But
yeah.
there's no excuse for not reaching across the aisle and working for the good of your district. And no matter what party you're in, you can do that.
So let's go on to the Morale closing. 19A, please, RJ.
We take much for granted in life. We assume their trash will be removed, their streetlights will stay on, their children will be educated, their water will be safe to drink, and their seniors will have a place to socialize. Before I decided to run, I also took our state senator for granted. I believed he was working for us. You may never hear another politician say this, but I was wrong. I have spoken with nearly every municipal leader in our district, and the clear majority ask, where's Ryan? Where is Ryan? He is embracing divisive issues, benefiting from dark money, and partnering with suspect organizations. While he's doing that, we're missing leadership on finding additional funding to our schools, leadership to reduce healthcare costs, leadership to relieve opioid addiction, leadership to focus on water and soil contamination. He's absent while our communities face serious fiscal problems. While providing no leadership on these issues, he did vote to drop 140,000 people off of Mass Health. He did vote for initiatives that drain money from public school budgets. He did vote to conceal the names of employers who shift their employee health benefit obligations to taxpayers like us. I truly don't know what bothers me more about my opponent's tenure in office. The useless priorities he has championed, or the most precious resource he has wasted, our time. I think things can be better. Here's what I think we can do. As your state senator, I will fight for a school funding solution that's equitable to all. For environmental regulations, and infrastructure funding for clean drinking water, for a healthcare system which is affordable for everyone, for long-term treatments for opioid addiction, for housing solutions to our veterans, and for policies that help our seniors to age in place. If you believe it can be better too, I ask you to join me like Congressman Joe Kennedy and so many other endorsers have. And I look forward to joining Ryan Fatman again for 2 other debates on October 22nd in Uxbridge and October 30th in Mendon. So please, vote November 6th for Tom Morelli. Thank you.
So, awesome closing. I think Tom did a great job. He's right.
Well, he summed it up nicely. He really kind of hit on all the points. Champion kind of useless issues that are not going to benefit the rest of us. And isn't that why we elect people to represent us?
Right. He apparently isn't replying anymore to my wife and I. He told my wife that Facebook is always a great way to ask your question and be answered.
That's what he said at the debate, yeah.
And he stopped answering her on Facebook.
Okay.
I asked him a question about the woman who drowned 4 of her children. I said I was unable to find anything in a Google search for that, and I'm interested to know if he has any more information about it. He didn't answer that, but he did see me at a visibility outside of his office hours, so he answered me on that. He sent me a text saying, nice seeing you this morning. You should have come inside. I'm on a lot of milk cartons in there, which I thought was hilarious because I posted a picture of him on Facebook on a milk carton because he deserves it. Where's Ryan? So I believe that we are out of time. So I want to thank both of you for coming in. It was wonderful having you both. This was a great show.
It was
and
good
I'm
going
really glad
through
we
it
did this.
again, and I enjoyed it too.
Okay, well, thank you so much.
Well, I look forward to, I'll be at the debate tomorrow night at the Grange in
So will I.
Uxbridge.
Yep, so will I.
It'll
Yep.
be Pat Malone versus Mike Soda for the state representative, and Tom Morelli versus Ryan Fatman. Now, does Ryan Fatman show up? I guess we'll have to get there.
We will see, won't we?
Maybe we need more milk cartons.
Okay. So thank you both. You've been watching All Politics is Local. All Politics is Local is a production of the Greater Blackstone Valley Democrats. For more information about the Greater Blackstone Valley Dems, feel free to visit our website at www.gbvdems.org. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Good night.